Hello, my name is Sammy Baloji. I'm a visual artist. I'm based in Brussels. I'm originally from Congo, DRC, and right now I'm talking from my studio in Brussels. I grew up in an industrial area, and I know that the mining company and also all these extractions going on are so important even today. And the city started around the extraction. At that time, it was Congo, Belgian colony. It all started when I finished my university, and I was hired in the French Cultural Center as a photographer. And there I started to work with architect and historian in order to document the industrial and architecture heritage of the country. Working with scientists made me also discover all this archive related to the colonial time, and also seeing how all the city was built around this notion of extraction, but also with notion of segregation, the racial issues, and seeing also how the urban planning was even divided in terms of race. So this became really important for me, a discovery, but also, yeah, revealing the violence behind all this extractive system.
Dans le cadre majestueux de la forêt équatoriale, le long des rives du fleuve Congo, au milieu d'une population indigène peu touchée par la civilisation.
First of all, it's important to know that there was only one company during the colonial time. So from 1910 to 1960, there was only one company. It was a Belgian company that was running and exploiting all the mineral resources in Katanga. The whole company became a national company under Mobutu, the dictatorial regime that we had from 65 till 97. We didn't know about the colonial story or history, basically because during the dictatorial regime, there was all this need of building a national identity. For me, it's this national idea that also erased memories or the notion of questioning, basically the landscape, but also this idea of nation. What does it mean in our case? So there's kind of a social amnesia that it's been carried by the dictatorial regime. So it's through this field research with those historians and architects that I started to figure out how the scientific approach in terms of what is actually an architecture, what is a building, why is it meant for, what are the ideas behind, what style of architecture is it. So I was basically being confronted by all these historical backgrounds of building, the use of building, the intention behind the building, but at the same time knowing that all these notions were not taken in consideration by Congolese people who were actually living in those buildings, that they were occupying them. So basically, between the historical research and the use of the building, there was something that coming out that somehow informed me this notion of subjectivity, basically between the intention of the building and the inhabitant, how actually the inhabitant used the building. So this is where also archives became so important, because all these photographs taken from 1910 to 60 were documenting basically this colonial agenda of how to provide workers and how to control bodies of workers.
Bénéficiant de l'apport de la science moderne, l'agriculture en Afrique noire va-t-elle au-devant d'une prospérité à laquelle nul n'eût osé rêver il y a seulement un quart de siècle?
So basically, the archives informed me a lot in terms of two different perspectives of how to live together. So, like from the colonial perspective, it could be like how to have bodies that would work for the capital benefits, basically, without having any soul or any voice or any aim to reclaim a certain equality in terms of life conditions or living conditions and so on. So the question was basically, what does it mean considering the shared heritage, while it's based on racial hierarchy, but also based on violence and based on erasure of local cultures and so on. So how to get out of all these conditions in order to think about a common or shared history or present and future. What I discover with the archive, it's not only the colonial history, but it's also this relation between the subject who's photographed and the one who's taking the photograph. And all these two elements comes together because photography arrived in Africa or even in Congo with colonial expeditions, basically, rather than like drawings or paintings, which were considered to be more subjective than photography. So photography was basically used as a scientific tool in order to objectively produce images of the territory and indigenous that were encountered, to control them. Photography created this image of the savage, of the indigenous. And it's just through anthropometry that they just realized that it wasn't possible to represent actually the first race, or, like how photography can really represent a typical race and different from another, basically. So in that way, I started also to take distance with the medium itself, knowing that I'm coming from Congo and I'm coming from these communities that were controlled and so on. So for me, it was basically so important to ask myself, how am I possible to use the same medium and create a new language out of the colonial ones, because I'm using the same tool. So I mean, it took me time to realize that what is so important, it's how to create an image and how an image can become a language and how a language can become a vocabulary. So it's not really that I'm a researcher or I'm an historian or I'm aware or I'm representing the society. Like I'm so knowledgeable concerning all these communities. It's not really that, but it's really like, how do I find myself a space of or a context of expression? So the context is really what drives me to gather both archives, interviews, or even collaborating with scientists, anthropologists or ethnographers and so on. It's so important for me to be not in control, but to be aware of the context that I'm creating around the language or the narrative that I'm proposing.